An old farmhouse with a fire blazing on the hearth has a way of conjuring up old memories. This is particularly so when the first icy winds come prowling under the eaves and there's a smell of frost in the air. It is then that the memories come flooding back, and they are memories of Grandma and Grandma's cooking. They are memories of long-remembered aromas drifting from the kitchen and long-remembered tastes that a small boy somehow loses with growing up, forever haunting and elusive. They are memories of buckwheat cakes and sorghum molasses and fresh homemade sausage of a peppermint morning, and of Grandpa sitting at the big table in the kitchen and bowing his head and saying the blessing. They are memories of plain and simple food, and of Grandma greasing a black iron skillet, stirring a pan over the wood stove, or cooking ash cakes on the hearth. Memory can play strange tricks, and when it comes to remembering Grandma's cooking, it's like being with her right there in the kitchen. So that was a little piece from John Parris, one of my favorite writers about Appalachia. He specifically wrote about Western North Carolina, where I live, but that was a little section from Conjuring Up Old Memories. Food does that for us, whether it's memories of Grandma, your mother, even yourself. Maybe if you cooked something when your kids were young and now you don't cook it anymore, but food has those wonderful memories tied to it. Well, today I want to share a recipe with you, which is kind of funny. It has a lot of memories tied to it, but they're not my memories. They're your memories. A lot of people have asked me over and over if I would share the recipe for tea cakes, if I knew how to make tea cakes. Well, the only time I had tea cakes, several years ago, the girls had a friend named Lauren, real nice girl, and she lived way further down in Georgia, but she would come up to this area sometimes and she'd stay with us. Maybe she'd spend the week. And one time she made tea cakes for us, and we really liked them. I don't think I ever made them again. Maybe Corey made them once or twice. Anyway, but people continuously ask me, do you have a tea cake recipe? Do you have a tea cake recipe? Well, I asked Miss Cindy, my mother-in-law, if she had any memories of tea cakes, and she said, no, I don't really think so. Well, I asked Granny, when you was little, did anybody make tea cakes? No, I don't ever remember eating tea cakes. So that just really wasn't a memory for them, or in turn for me, because neither one of them continued to make them, so I don't have those memories. But today I want to share a tea cake recipe with you, and it comes from John Parris, from his mountain cooking cookbook so the same person I just read you the little piece about his grandma, this was actually a recipe that he had in his cookbook. So the ingredients for tea cakes are very common. I'm sure you probably have them in your pantry. So the title of his recipe is Old-Fashioned Tea Cakes, and it takes a half a cup of shortening, 1 cup sugar, 2 eggs, 4 cups of plain flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, a half a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup milk, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So now I'm going to show you how to put it all together. So our first step is to cream the shortening and the sugar. Okay, now we're going to add the eggs and mix well. Now that we've got that mixed, we're going to scoot back a little. Let's see, I've got a helper, Corey, here. Hand me another bowl, Corey. Okay, now we're going to put our flour and our baking soda and salt and sift it together. Maybe it'll fit. Okay. Corey can discard that. Move this. And I've got my milk, and I'm going to add my vanilla to it. Go ahead and add it. And then we're going to alternate adding the milk vanilla and the flour to the batter in here that we've got going. Okay, now we've got our cookie dough ready to roll out. So now it's time to roll out the dough and cut it into cookies, into the tea cakes. Now, Corey and Katie's friend Lauren, all those years ago, I think that she just kind of pinched off some dough and made little, patted them out with her hands, in other words. So you could do that. You could roll them into balls, I'm sure, and they would probably spread out, or maybe flatten them with a fork, or you could use a cookie cutter. I'm going to use a glass today. These little old glasses like this I really love. I love snuff jars. This is, I don't think snuff come in this one, but something did. Somebody would have bought that with something in it. And I look for them at thrift stores and different places like that. I just like the feel of them. And I love, sometimes we get to go dig like in old dumps, and boy, I am excited when I find a whole one there. If it's a snuff jar, a snuff glass, used to be a snuff jar, or one like this, which I'm not sure what come in. So you'll need some additional flour, of course, and this is a really pretty soft dough, so you may have to add some to it to get it to be firm enough to actually cut out. And I think his recipe says he wants that you should aim for 1/8 inch as far as how small, how thin to actually roll them out. You can dip your cutter in the flour to help it cut better. Usually you can get 1 or 2 or 3 before you have to start again. And you can play around with the thickness. You may want thicker cookies, tea cakes. They really are cookies, but tea cakes. Or thinner, so you can play around with that part. I like to use a spatula to get them, for sugar cookies and things like this, to actually get them off of the board without breaking. His recipe doesn't say anything about greasing the pan, but I'm using parchment paper, but I don't really think that you'd even need to grease it. But you could use your judgment or your preference on that. You could use parchment paper, or you could try to put a light coating of grease, or try it without it. It's what I would probably do, and see how they turn out. I don't think they'll stick. And if you get a lot of flour on the top of the cookie, you can kind of scrape it off or brush it off if you have a little pastry brush, or use your finger. And this recipe makes quite a bit. I can already tell from this. I think, let's see if he says how much. No, he doesn't tell us how much it makes, but several dozen, I would say. So this would be a good recipe to make and share with someone. Maybe 2 or 3 someones. Since Matt works in the maintenance department, and he has for a long time, a different one than the one he's currently in now, my favorite thing is to do with things like this that I have extras, to send them to work with him, where I know there'll always be someone that'll eat them. think some of my first ones was more like 1/4 of an inch. That one right there feels that's probably how thin they actually should be, which I'm sure you can tell what 1/8 of an inch is better than me. So I just got the first batch or the first tray of the tea cakes out of the oven. So they are, let's hold this up for you, you can see, they're kind of hard, so they'll snap, I'm sure. I mean, and they've got a unique taste. I've already eaten one of them because I couldn't wait. I don't say unique taste, it's not like exotic or anything like that, but they're not overly sweet, which makes sense when you think about I only used 1 cup of sugar for the 4 cups of flour. So not very sweet at all. So I'm guessing the name of the recipe, tea cakes, comes from maybe the days when they would eat these with tea, maybe even a holdover from Britain. So if any of you from Europe, if you're familiar with that, from the British Isles, so much of those influences come here to Appalachia, especially to Western North Carolina. You can enlighten us, please do. But it is a good little cookie because it's not very sweet. So I think I would definitely make them again. I imagine that a lot of people might want to sprinkle some sugar on top, or maybe drizzle something. Ooh, drizzling chocolate over them would be really good. But you'll have to, all of you who wanted me to make a video about tea cakes, now you're going to have to let me know if this is actually the kind that you remember that your grandmother made, if this is how they turned out. So I hope, as always, that you'll continue to drop back by and sharing memories of Appalachian Foodways, whether it's my memories or maybe it's your memories. Keep sharing them with me, and even if it's something like these tea cakes that I never really knew anything about other than the one friend Corey and Katie had that made them at our house years ago, I'll dig in there and try to find out for you and see if I can't come up with a recipe. So please just keep dropping back by and helping me celebrate Appalachia.